Yes. No worries. Thanks. Have some attendees.
Yep, we'll give it. These things always start on rock and roll time.
We need an opening act.
It's like fun.
Doorbell.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for logging in to learn a little bit more about how the team at MLB.com is leveraging Chartbeat's headline testing tool to build a stronger connection with their readers. I'm joined today by Dan Silverman and Rebecca Fontana of the MLB.com team, and I will be your host today. My name is Jill, and I lead education here at Chartbeat. So just to kick off, turn the video off for a second. Cool. So MLB.com. Tell me a little bit about the site and a little bit about what you guys do for MLB.com.
Yeah, I do content strategy for MLB.com. So I'm basically the middleman between the analytics team and the editorial team and figuring out what we're doing, what works, what doesn't work, what we can do better, and how we could constantly make our site better and a better experience for all the baseball fans out there.
And I am part of the team that oversees the digital content operations for Major League Baseball. And I primarily focus on the editing and web production side.
Cool. So we're happy to have you guys here today. We've been working with you for almost 2 years at this point. Though it seems like just yesterday, and you guys have been some of our most prolific headline testers. For those of you out there who aren't familiar with it, it's a tool that allows the team at MLB to write multiple headlines for the same story and really test it out to see which one is right for that particular piece of content and for the very unique audience that you guys have. You guys have been using it since about February of last year, and we can see you have run more than 3,000 tests.
Is that a lot?
Surprised me. So, what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about how you've implemented the tool and about what you've learned about best practices for headline writing, which is a topic that's near and dear to my heart as I started my career as a headline writing copy editor. So to jump in a little bit, in the past year, you guys really have embedded the tool pretty deeply into the MLB workflows. Can you give me a little bit of an overview of, what you were hoping to accomplish as you brought this tool in, or, what questions you had that you were looking to gather some data on?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that we really wanted was data. Until this time, we weren't flying blind. I mean, we have traffic numbers and whatnot, but we just wanted more data. We just wanted to work smarter. We wanted to know what our readers and our fans responded to, and to be able to kind of give them, the kind of content that they wanted.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I actually joined MLB last summer, so after we'd started using Chartbeat. So when I came in, I was coming into all this data we were getting, and my job was kind of to figure out how to explain it and what we can learn from it. So it's not just a pile of data sitting there, it's what can we actually then do with it.
Cool. So can you give me a little bit of an idea of, how the tool works inside MLB? Who's using it? How you think about your tests? Just a little bit of a look inside the process.
So who's using it? Well, we have someone who's, there's always someone on the headlines, right? There's someone whose primary focus is, what's in our headline stack, what are we putting in on the focusing on the website, what's in the app, and that's the person who is the point of contact for all the headline testing.
Cool. And then, is that person kind of plugging away on their own, or, how do you come up with the various headline ideas that you're going to plug into the tool?
It's a combination. I mean, that person will do a lot because they are kind of, they're editing and deciding, well, what should go where, and, and how to position it and how to present it. And so they will do a lot of that, looking into the story and saying, okay, what's interesting about this, and what can I kind of pull out to make this a better headline and test, whatnot. But we also do, we'll crowdsource. We'll do it, just in our bullpen. We'll shout it out, and people will kind of, call in things and call in suggestions. We also have a lot of people who work remotely, so we use Slack a lot,
Yeah.
which I'm sure most people do. And a lot of people, someone will say, hey, I'm testing this. Anyone have any ideas? And people will, will kind of fire in their suggestions, and we'll do it that way.
So is it mostly kind of your digitally focused, like, team that's focused on the website itself, or do you have, the editors that worked on the story, or the reporters that were working on it are jumping into some of those?
Well, the editors for sure. I mean, they're contributing to it, but they're also, awesome in general, coming up with the initial headline, right? And so they're kind of, all right, well, they're putting their best foot forward, I hope, in the initial headline, and then, we're kind of saying, okay, well, what else can we try?
Amazing. Between, talking about it and getting ideas from other people, do you have any general guidelines for them? What should or should not be testing? Just some rules around how they can and cannot use the tool? Or is it much more of like you trust their judgment, and they kind of do what they need to do?
Well, I mean,
It's kind of in between the two. Like, we kind of would find it limiting to have hard and fast rules. You don't want to say never use a question mark, or never use quotes, or always use quotes, because that winds up limiting. So we want to give everybody the freedom to play around and do different things and try out different things, but then we also want to make sure we're getting takeaways from it. So it's not just do whatever you want and who cares. It's definitely, let's put some thought into what we're doing, and we're willing to test it out, but then let's actually think about whether it works or not.
Yeah, I think in my years of talking to you guys about headlines, it's something that has always stood out to me, the way that you are scientific about it. So, there's definitely some hypotheses behind what you guys are testing, rather than just, in the moment, crowdsourcing and plugging in headlines. Was that something that just happened, or how did you guys think about making that hypothesis test consider the results culture work?
I think, especially in the beginning, we were very deliberate. We didn't just kind of roll the balls out and say, go shoot around. It was, we did it slow, and, there were not a lot of people involved in the testing. It was, okay, we are going to test this specific idea and do it over the course of, a period of time, do it over different days of the week, different times of the day, and different types of stories to see, okay, does this kind of headline work? Does that kind of headline work? When we were testing, Rebecca mentioned questions, do questions work? Do other kinds of things work? And then as we kind of learned these general overall, kind of guidelines, then we would take that information. Now, like you said, we've been doing it for a while. People are kind of armed with this information, and now we kind of say, okay, have at it. But because you can, because you know what you're doing, now you can have at it with, armed with this information.
Amazing. And actually, you guys came with some examples that we'll get into, but, I know one of the things that we discussed was questions, right? I think it's something that every newsroom has thought about. And usually we find that they're a little polarizing. There are people who are like, you should never use a question, and other people who are like, the right question might be the right headline. But I actually think I learned a lot from seeing what you guys tested. So talk to me a little bit about the way you guys approached trying to put some data behind the editorial assumptions.
Yeah, so this example specifically is what we call the ask and answer type headline, which we found works really well because you don't want just a question because it comes across as clickbaity a lot of the time. So we did a lot of testing, a lot of experimenting to see what worked. And this example where we ask a question, but then also give some context to the answer works really well because people want to click and read more, but they also don't think they're being tricked into reading it, or it doesn't seem like a clickbait headline.
Yeah, I remember in the early days of you guys testing this, you found that the more vague questions would get the click, but almost no engagement after the click. And it looked like we were conditioning readers just to read to get the answer to that question. Whereas, you can see like this, you guys have a lot of context, a lot of expertise around this that you can share. So it's interesting to me to see how this question and answer construction got people deeper into the content.
Right, and I think it also helps that we have baseball's audiences, which is kind of a unique audience. A lot of them are very dedicated users who like baseball and know a lot about baseball. So a clickbait headline isn't going to work as well on them as it would say like a different publication where you just see it on Facebook or something. We get people coming to our site for baseball information, so that's what we want to give them too. So we don't stoop to the level of clickbait headlines. So we've been trying to find a solution that actually does work and gets people to click without being mad. So.
Yeah, amazing. That was definitely something that we thought about as we built the tool. Optimizing for clicks is dangerous.
Right.
And so that's why, even simple things like this question and answer construction to show how much that headline can actually affect readership, readership on the stories. Which brings me to my next question. With technology like this in some of the newsrooms we work with, we've occasionally seen that editors can be a little apprehensive, right? Especially when it comes to something like headlines. There's a lot of experience and training that goes into headline writing. Were your editors in any way apprehensive about putting technology on top of it?
I don't think so. I mean, if they were, no one mentioned it to me. Everyone I mentioned, when we started, exploring this, getting something like this, and then when we finally landed, on a tool that works as well as this one does, everyone was like, wow, that's awesome. It just sounded, just to be able to use something and be informed with what they're doing and to make what they're doing better and to bring in more readers to the content that we're producing. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, no one really seemed to be, put off by it at all.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So, I mean, but there's no one kind of breathing down our necks saying, hey, use clickbaity headlines, right? So when we look and we test it and say, hey, headlines with a question mark, they don't really work, or at least they don't work for quality clicks. So we don't use it. If the quality click rate isn't there, then we're not going to use it. And so I guess that might help make it easier for our editors to use the tool, knowing that someone's not going to ask them to use something they're not comfortable with.
Yeah. So I've always seen it very much comes from the top down. We're not using this solely to gain the traffic. And then, your editors have always struck me as very, very curious about their readers. One of the reasons we love talking to you is just the amazing questions that we've gotten, from your teams over the years. What are some of the other kind of headline writing assumptions that you guys have really thought about and tried to test out?
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So some of the assumptions, well, I mean, there were a bunch of things that we tried. I mean, when we first started with the tool, one of the biggest things we wanted to learn about were puns, right? I mean, we would use a lot of puns, and, puns are definitely fun to come up with for editors, but you know, we found that they weren't serving our fans. You know, I mean, you test a pun and people aren't clicking because they don't necessarily even understand what you're giving them. It just kind of helped to be a little more straightforward and to, you know, let someone know what they're about to read. So that was a big one. That helped a lot.
Yeah, and that's something that also helps when we sometimes forget that everybody in our office is obsessed with baseball, but we also want to reach a huge audience of people who maybe are more casual fans. Like I would definitely consider myself a more casual fan when I came in, and sometimes some of the headlines, whether with puns or with data, they can be almost too clever, which is what you were saying the other day.
Too inside baseball.
There you go. So yeah.
Sorry, we like puns too.
So we wanted just to make our headlines interesting to somebody who maybe isn't on the site every day as well, and come up with that like perfect balance between giving enough information, but then also making it really accessible to as many people as possible.
You know, as we've been talking about headlines, what we're really talking about is, you know, homepages and landing pages. Do you take a different approach on, you know, external channels? Like obviously SEO and homepage headlines work very differently, but, you know, are you more likely to use the puns or the casual language on an outlet like social? Or do you really kind of think about all those audiences in a similar vein?
Well, you know, we actually have a separate team that handles the social media accounts. I mean, we work with them, you know, hand in hand a lot, but you know, that's a separate team. You know, as far as you know, we don't really back away from, you know, the more casual headlines, you know, anywhere really. I mean, it's, you know, just because you're a big baseball fan doesn't mean you don't want to see a casual moment. I mean, they're fun, you know, someone catching the ball in their beer cup with the baby in their hand. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of, you know, everybody wants to see that. I mean, some people might be horrified by it. Some people might think it's awesome, but a lot of people want to see that. It's a fun moment. So, you know, we kind of present that to everybody. I don't think we hold off and say, or hold back and say, okay, well, if this is on the website, so we're going to be, you know, more conservative here.
Interesting. So I know that you guys have brought us some examples of tests that you wanted to kind of, you know, give us a look at some of the approaches that you've taken. So we're going to bring up some of the variants that you've written, and then you guys can talk a little bit about, you know, what about this test made it so interesting to you, or how it changed the way that you think about writing headlines for your audience. So the first one.
Oh yeah, so this is something we did very early on in our testing, and it's interesting that the second headline, agrees to record deal. It's, you know, it's a very small change, you know, between making a multi-year extension and to, you know, and a record deal. It's not a lot of difference in words, but it made a huge difference in engagement.
Because that second record deal headline was actually your winner.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it was. You know, it took something that was, you know, a fact in the story that was, hey, you know, this guy, you know, did something that no one's ever done before, and, you know, what is it? And, you know, we just kind of want to let people know that there's more to the story. You know, if you read, you know, DeYoung agrees to a multi-year extension, you kind of get the news. Like, you might want to click on it and get more information, you might not. But when we tell you, hey, there's this, you know, he set a record, it's like, oh, what is it? There's more information, there's more to explore and to learn, so.
And it contextualizes it. It tells you why it's important too. Because if you don't know a lot about baseball, is a multi-year extension good, bad? You don't really know. But if it's a record deal, that conveys importance too. So that's another reason that makes it clickable without making it clickbait.
And because this was one of the ones we did so early in the process, and it made such a big, you know, I don't remember the numbers, I don't know if you have it. I think it was like 100%.
It was 100% lift in traffic with, I think it was about 78% quality clicks, which is a click where someone read more than 15 seconds into the story. Because our research has shown that if you can get them past 15 seconds, you have a better chance of getting them through the story. So yeah, even in the very early testing days, you guys were already seeing some pretty significant lift on these headlines. You know, one question I had, you know, obviously you have the balance of fans of this particular team, and then you have, you know, overall baseball fans. So does that affect the way you think about something like this? Like, you know, would technically the multi-year extension be more important to St. Louis fans.
Absolutely.
Whereas, the record deal is something that you have to think about to, again, appeal to the wider community of baseball fans.
Yeah, and we actually have another example coming up that goes into that. I don't know if it's the next one or not. No, I'll save it for when we get to the one that's relevant for that. Yeah, for this one though, we tested obviously several different headlines. Some had a quote, some didn't. This is again one where we're trying to make it even a little more fun and a little more interesting to everybody, and again, like show why baseball is fun, and instead of just giving like a stat in the headline, which also just kind of gives away the whole story in the headline.
Yeah, I mean, that's a balance. We've seen super short headlines, so like 15 characters or less, don't give a reader enough information, but you also can't tell them the whole story in that headline, which I have occasionally seen headlines that look more like tweets.
Yeah.
So, I know that you guys are also a little bit constrained by the amount of characters you get. You get on the platform, but you can clearly test out different approaches. So the quote is I think an interesting thing. I think when people think about quotation headlines, they think more about like the deep emotional stories. And one thing we saw from this test is the headline really, the quote in the headline really kind of humanized that story. Have you found any nuances to where quotes do and don't work?
We've been finding that quotes work a lot. It's, you're trying to pick out the most interesting thing in a story, and very often it's something that someone says.
Yeah.
And, you give that to people, and people want to find out why. I mean, in this instance, Christian Yelich, you can say crushed a homer. A lot of guys crush homers, and, and they're fun to watch, and people will, click in to watch them. But this was a shot, third deck in Milwaukee, and, we wanted to convey that in the headlines, like, if you like long homers, you're really going to want to watch this. And that little snippet conveyed that.
Yeah, and it's interesting also that this headline, that one, is the one with the least amount of technical information about the home run. Like the other one has the longest, or it's a third deck, but the one that won is the one that basically only has his quote and that it was a home run, which proves that people want the general emotion of the story, and then they'll click in to actually get all the specific data of it. You don't have to give it all away in the headline.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice way to differentiate this story from, all the other great home run moments that will happen in a season. Baseball, how many games are in a season?
162.
162, that's a lot of home runs and a lot of games. So, it's interesting to connect this performance back to, the person that had that experience. And I think you guys really have done a great job with, taking really the meat of the quote and weaving it into some larger headlines. You can't just slap the whole quote out there and expect it to win. So I think this is where it gets to, you want to test out the tactic, but at the same time, a headline is there to do a job. And I think this one, who did it, it was a home run, and then you get that emotional flavor, which is amazing because really it's not that many characters to have packed in that many kind of benefits for the readers.
Yeah, it's a 3-word quote, and yet you still get the point across, which I think, works really well.
And it's always fun for us, we did some research into headline tests across our customers, and one of the things that we found had a lifting effect for some people was quotes. So it's always nice for us to kind of see you guys using that research in action. My greatest sorrow is that Chartbeat released headline testing about 3 months after I joined the company. So I never got to use it. So I'm thankful that I've gotten to live vicariously through your teams for such a long time.
Jill, anytime you want to sit in the bullpen and write headlines, you're welcome. Standing invite.
You heard it live. My witnesses will have to hold you to it. Although I will admit, while I'm a casual Phillies fan, sports headline writing has never been my forte. So maybe you don't want me writing baseball-related headlines, but hey, maybe we'll discover something fun. Cool. Next example.
Oh, this one goes also with what we were saying again about making baseball fun and making it interesting and showing what the players are thinking and doing and reacting just because, yeah, it's easy to find all the data about the baseball game and who won and who didn't, but we want to use our editorial experience to actually tell the full story of the game, what's happening on and off the field. So that's what we were thinking about with the headline, and especially the one that won, you could see that.
Yeah, this is another one, like the contract one we're talking about that we did really early on in the process and got a really large lift, and it just was very illuminating to see just how impactful a little tweak in the headline can be for people to be engaged in the story. You say Clayton Kershaw, future Hall of Famer, is talking smack about the next big thing in baseball. People want to know what it is, and we want to let people know, hey, this is what's going on. This is fun. Baseball is fun. These guys are competitive. Clayton Kershaw is telling Shohei Ohtani, not so fast, and it works. It was a fun story. It was a good read, and we drew people in by more people in by that headline.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's interesting, again, to casual fans. Even if you don't necessarily know the players or the team, if you see somebody's talking smack about somebody else, you want to read that story. So I think that's also why this one works so well.
Well, and looking back between this one and this one, I'm interested to ask how you guys deal with players' names, because Yelly is more of a nickname. When do you use nicknames? When do you use the full name?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a struggle for us sometimes too. I mean, some players become their nickname, and some players you have to use the full name. We found actually that sometimes using the full name on a player, even if his last name is somewhat distinct, does give you a better lift just by using the full name. It's really kind of a player by player discovery process for us. Something like Yelly, we don't use it too much. It's a little bit more for space when we need it. But he's an MVP. He's people certainly know who you're talking about when you put that in there. So it depends on the player.
And that's something that you guys have tested against?
Sometimes, more often with full names versus just last names, or just sometimes, some players will just use their first name when it's distinct. Gleyber Torres on the Yankees. It's we'll always say Gleyber instead of Torres. You say Torres, that could mean multiple players. You say Gleyber, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and obviously SEO rules are different, but this
Right.
is for headlines. We have a little more flexibility to play around and try out different things.
Yes, thank you. Please do not use some of these tips on your article pages.
Oh,
It is not good for the search
No
search ranking.
for SEO.
But again, that does get to you have to think about these channels separately. They have different rules, what someone needs on the article itself and what someone might respond to on a homepage where they have the potential to choose lots of different stories to spend their time with. I think, again, another interesting fact is just to see the difference on MLB.com, between that straightforward factual search indexy headline and then the more emotional, the more grabby homepage headlines. But I think you guys do a great job at a consistent experience, right? If I see that homepage headline and then the article page headline and then the article itself, it still feels like you took me where I wanted to go. And I think, again, that comes back to the fact that, you're relying on engagement and not just clickbait.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're really proud of our content. We have reporters in every city, in the field, bringing you all this information and all this context and all this, this fun baseball stuff. And we want to get people there, and we want people to read it and enjoy it and love it like we do. So, it's the same reason why we might find that something gets people to click, but the quality click is low, that we won't use it. We really want people to get there and get to the content.
And I think that's a really, really important point. Data can teach us things about our readers, but, at no point is it a replacement for actual editorial judgment, right? You can't just blindly follow the data.
Right, this goes back to what we were saying before about the rules. It's hard to have rules because we also want to make sure we have our editorial judgment, and we have our own standards for our content as well, which sometimes overruns the rule. So
Balance, always
Yes,
balance.
exactly.
Right, you know, something our boss says a lot of is do what makes sense.
Yeah.
And that sounds a little obvious, but it's not, and it's not something, you
Yeah.
know, where it doesn't, you know, unfortunately, it's not. And that's kind of like the principle we always try to go by, is do what makes sense, and, you know, it seems to work.
And I think, you know, we've talked about that in terms of, you know, putting yourself in the reader's shoes as well. You know, because you guys have your breaking stories, you have some, you know, shorter pieces about a specific event, but we've also talked a lot about, you know, your oral histories, which are longer form stories, and, you know, expectation setting. Is there anything, any nuances you've learned specifically about longer pieces versus breaking pieces?
You know, it's funny with the breaking pieces, you know, you kind of get the benefit, you know, when you're putting up a breaking news story, you know, you're using the first headline you think of, right? I mean,
Speed.
Right, speed, you know, we got to get it up, we got to get it up quick, you know, people, you know, we got to get the news out there. And so when you're using the first headline you think of, it's not going to be your best foot forward, right? I mean, that's just kind of a, you know, a rule or a truism, I guess. And so when we have our breaking news stories, when we go back and like, okay, this news is up, now we can flesh it out, now we can improve the headline, you know, you're, you know, kind of by default going to, you know, give it a much better headline. For our longer form pieces, you know, I feel like it's just something we, you know, we put a lot more care into and a lot more time. And so before we even publish it, we are sitting there thinking, okay, hey, let's come up with some, you know, some really good, you know, let's come up with some really good options, a few different things that we can put on this to, you know, to test.
Yeah, and we also do a lot of 30 club stories, so it's stories with sections for all 30 teams. And so then we'll do testing too on the different club sites to see what the different headlines for different teams are. And they are very often different and work best when they're specific to whatever that team is.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, you know, covering sports, you guys have a little bit of a unique situation where you not only have the power of a homepage, you have power of the individual club, all 30 of the club-based sites. And so also been really interesting to see how you're using headline testing to personalize those individual experiences. So balancing the unusualness of a single story versus the very club specific
Right.
information.
And actually, this goes really well with our next example. If you want to go to it, this should be yeah. So this was one where he's on the Cardinals and he obviously had this crazy play and we wanted to make it relevant to the broader baseball audience. So not just if you're a Cardinals fan, but how can we make this story interesting to everybody? Because it actually is a really interesting story. So we want to convey what we think is interesting and make sure everybody else gets it. And that's something that we really tried to get across in this headline. And if you want to show the one.
You know, I almost wish we had put this one up as a poll for the audience to see if you could play guess which one won. I won't guess because I clearly know that the answer was the fourth headline that you wrote was the winner.
Yeah, and so not only does this make this relevant to everybody because it sounds like something awesome you want to look at, it's also using an action word in the headline, which is a call to action for the reader too. You have to take a look at this, and it's not clickbaity because it actually is, well, it's a little clickbaity,
Right.
but it also,
but there's a payoff.
Yes,
It was a really fun moment. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it was a little embarrassing for the player, but you know, we don't look to embarrass players at all, but he had fun with it. He and his teammates were laughing about it afterwards. It's
So now I have to tell it. I can't take a look right now. What happened?
Go for it.
Well, you're gonna have to click on the story and find out, Jill. No, he went up the wall to try to catch the ball, and he slipped and he kind of tumbled a little bit, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah, and fun to watch for, again, like we said, anybody, whether you're a more serious baseball fan or a more casual fan, and
Right, we're not
Yeah.
willing to kind of make that style of headline unless we
Right.
think the payoff is really worth it.
right.
Well, and then one thing I know about your site is you guys rely pretty heavily on video clips of these things. And is this, you know, a case where you knew that the video was so much the story?
Yeah.
That, you know, I think this headline set a little bit of an expectation for me. If I'm going to click on it, I would expect to be able to see it and not just read.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, a lot of what we try to do is to get people to come in to watch the video. I mean, we have so much of it. And there's just, you know, we have pretty much every play, every play you're going to want to see. And, you know, we want people to watch it and watch the game and enjoy it. And so we do very often will write things to lead people into the video because it's great to watch.
Also, again, expectation setting.
Right.
If I'm in a mood or if I'm in a place in my day where I can watch video, then I might be more inclined to click on that. And, if I'm not in a place where I can watch video, I might choose a different story rather than just, hitting that page and being like, I don't have time. I'm just going to close this page.
Right.
So I think there's a little bit of subtle reader psychology you guys are trying to game on a little bit here.
Yeah, definitely. And this is one where, no, I wouldn't say this is a rule to use for every story, not at all, but it works really well in this case. So this is a good example of where we're taking the test results and using that to influence our editorial decisions going forward, but using it more as like a guidelines than a hard and fast rule. And that's really what works and what helps. So you're not going to future decisions blindly, whether that's blindly without any information or blindly like just following a rule. So this is something where, yeah, you still need to think about it every time you choose a headline, but with examples like this, it definitely helps you make the correct or an educated guess for it.
Awesome. Well, so thank you so much for bringing the examples. I think it always helps to have real headlines to talk about. And these were definitely some interesting angles you were able to take on this. So what I'd like to just kind of talk about for the next couple of minutes is kind of, these individual tests are great, but you spoke earlier briefly about how, you want to use that data to get better over time. What are some of those best practices that have come out of this, or, testing constructions that you may not have thought were going to be right for MLB?
One of the things that we found, and I think Rebecca mentioned this before, is doing, is doing stories that touch on all 30 teams. Something that has something for everybody, something for every fan. And we learned through headline testing, and that this really works. And so we do a lot of it. I mean, we did yesterday, hardest guy to strike out on every team. Right, and so it's a fun topic, okay, right? And it's fun data, and then just by the headline, this is the hardest guy to strike out on every team. Whoever you're a fan of, I'm going to be able to go find my guy, right? And then you can go and you can either scan through it and just kind of scan to your team, or you can read the whole thing, or you can go to your team and your rival team, and that's something that seems to really work for us.
Yeah, and I was just going to say it also helps in that we're constantly testing out different things and trying out different things too. It's never become. We've never started running on autopilot with our testing. Like there's always constant takeaways and constant learnings from it. So that's kind of something we've been trying to encourage and not just make it like a habit to test out the same 3 formats of headlines every time. We want to always be thinking of new things and trying out new things too.
Which is amazing after, you guys are about a year and a half of running these tests, over 3,000 tests. To kind of keep that creativity and that momentum going, because I know, unfortunately we cannot show your lift analysis data, but, you definitely have gotten a stronger lift and stronger readership from your headline testing and have consistently gotten better for a year and a half. So, what are the things that you two have done that are helping to keep that momentum going? How do you talk about this and share this internally?
Okay.
Sure. So I'm always trying to share like my takeaways on the tests we've done, or what worked, what didn't work, what surprised us, or what didn't. And whether that's just like emails, or like we get our reports emailed to us, or we do roundups of, hey, this one worked really well, even if it's just in Slack or like in our daily meetings, hey, this one worked really well, check it out. So a lot of what I'm doing is just, oh, hey, I saw this interesting thing, let me just share it with everybody so then everybody's aware of it, which is kind of crazy, but it also works really well. So that's something I'm always trying to do, is just make sure everybody's aware of like all this cool stuff that we're doing and what we could learn from it and keep doing more of it too. So it doesn't just, we don't test something that like falls into a void and nobody ever looks at it again. My job is to keep promoting it to as many people as possible.
Right, and from my side of it, I mean, it's actually pretty easy. I mean, you don't have to cajole people to do it or remind people, come on, we got to test more. I mean, people love it. People are competitive.
Yeah.
They want,
No.
Yeah, I mean, our editors, they want to win, right? They want their headlines to win. They want to find that nugget in the story that they're going to put in the headline that's going to make, the story, lift 100% or whatever it is. So there's really, there's no challenge there. It just kind of works out.
Yeah, I've always loved just how healthy that competitive instinct is. I've never gotten a feeling from your team like they're like, oh man, if my tests aren't doing well, I'm gonna get in trouble. Like there definitely is just a very friendly like desire to be at the top of the headline testing pile, and some good-natured gloating over good tests. And I think it is to the credit of both of you, the way that you celebrate those wins, and even just the nature of curiosity when something doesn't go as expected. It's really easy to talk to your staff about the surprising like big lift ones, but the way that you guys have been able to also come back and say, this wasn't successful, but we still learned something. Definitely a credit to both of you.
Thanks. And it also helps that we are Major League Baseball. So we've always been good at baseball content, but now the next step is figuring out how to make it really great content too. So it's a lot of taking what we've been doing for years and figuring out how to make it even better. So that's kind of one of the benefits we have at our company, is that we kind of have that flexibility to try out new things and different things and figure out how to really make it the best possible experience for our readers.
Yeah, because I mean, you have the advantage of being MLB.com,
Yeah, exactly.
but that doesn't mean you are the only outlet writing about baseball. You guys
Right.
actually have, pretty significant competition in the space. And I think, you can see here, you guys have developed a voice, right? There's a personality that lets me know I'm on MLB.com and I should be coming here for a reason. Is that something else that's been top of mind for you? Or
I mean, to some extent, but not really. I mean, because we're Major League Baseball, we don't really see it as competition. Not that they're, not because, people can't compete, in more in the sense that, anyone who's writing about baseball and, is appealing to baseball fans is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want people to love the game. I mean, that's what we're here for. So, while yes, we're competitive and we want better headlines and we want people to love our content, we're serving the fans. And so if other people and other outlets are serving baseball fans, that's great.
nice, an ecosystem of fandom. Great way to think about it. So, we still have a couple more minutes, and we're going to open it up. If anybody has any questions for Rebecca and Dan, you can type them into the chat, and we're happy to ask them out loud. But, while you guys think of questions, if you have any, my last question for the two of you would be, were there any real surprises, either headlines you didn't expect to win, or people that are super into headline testing that like kind of caught you off guard? Or has it just been a year and a half of very small surprises along the way?
Well, one thing we noticed, actually, I think we've touched on this before, but it's that the super direct headlines, if we're just saying like, this happened and this, or something that's very straightforward, don't work as well as if we're actually showing our excitement in the headlines. Because if we're getting excited about a story, then other people are going to get excited about it too. And it just helps to convey that. Like, you don't want it to just be, here's a number, here's a name, here's that. If we're showing why we're excited about the story, that's going to make other people excited too.
Right, picking out something specific as opposed to summarizing the story is generally more appealing to readers. I think that's something we found is fairly consistent.
Awesome. Well, we'll give one more second. Any questions from the folks out there listening?
Okay, we answered everything.
We did perfectly. This is great.
Cool. Given how busy you guys are and you were gracious enough to come down to the Chartbeat office to talk with me today, I think we'll end it just by saying thank you. It's been great to share your expertise and your knowledge with a wider group of the Chartbeat family. So thank you to Rebecca and Dan. For anyone who has questions that they think of after we close, you can write into us at headlines@chartbeat.com, and we'll try to get those answers out. And thank you all for spending 45 minutes today to learn a little bit more about MLB and how they've leveraged headline testing to really evolve and think about their connection with their readers.
No, thank you for
Oh,
having
yeah,
us.
thanks
This
for
was,
having
Thanks, guys. Oh, and now as we're closing, we have one last question. No, it is actually just a thank you from the listening public. So thanks, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you on Chartbeat's next webinar to talk about how to use data to supplement editorial judgment and really build and grow a loyal audience. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.